I apologize, but I'm under the weather right now.
Because I don't feel good.
But the show must go on, so I'm going to push forward. There are a lot of things that were in motion last month that are going to continue into this next month, especially on the law firm side of things. But really, November overall was a big hiring month. I was trying to spend a lot of time on hiring for my law firm, but also trying to find a general manager or a new manager for my steam cleaning business, because that's someone who's going to take it over and is going to have the opportunity to earn a big equity slice in the business. So that is a very hard position to look for, or trying to find someone good takes a lot of time, I should say. So I spent a lot of time towards that, and I did find someone who I'm feeling pretty good about, and we're just about ready to get started there. So that has me pretty optimistic for the coming year with that business, but again, we'll see what happens once that starts. But otherwise, the vast majority of my efforts were going towards the law firm in this past month. The biggest change last month was hiring an intake department manager, and this is someone who's going to be in charge of the entire intake team. Intake being actually manning the phones and taking the initial calls from potential clients or potential emails. Whatever the initial inquiry is, the intake team is responsible for taking that, and then also getting the potential client, to try and become an actual client. So getting them engaged and signing an engagement letter and getting all the onboarding things taken care of, so that after that's all done on the intake side, it can head on over to the legal side, so the attorney side of things, to actually start working on the matter. Intake is the bridge between marketing and the actual legal services. So if that bridge is strong, it will allow us to really spend our marketing dollars effectively and get them over to become paid clients. It's very hard to actually up marketing spend if you don't have a good intake department, because that is how you actually collect all those leads that you're paying for. So I really want to make sure I get that right. So that was my big hire for the month. However, I was still looking for other positions as well. One of those being an associate who will be starting in December. I found someone who I'm pretty confident about, so looking forward to that. And that way I'll finally be able to start offloading legal work to someone else, and that will upgrade our capacity in a big way, because I can now spend more of my time towards trying to grow the firm, trying to get more business, or still billing if I need to. But I'll have this extra capacity because I have someone who's just focused on billing. So that will give us a lot more room to expand going forward. And it's really that first hire on that side of things that's the hardest, because right now I'm doing all the legal work. So if I can have someone who I could pass off at least some, if not most, or eventually all, it's not all going to fall on one person. We'll grow out the team in a much bigger way in the future, but the first one is the hardest, because I have to both facilitate the transition and getting their plate full, but also still maintaining the current matters that I'm working on without dropping the ball there. So it's going to be a stressful month or two while we get things up and running, but I'm pretty confident. I think I found a really good person, so I'm looking forward to getting started. I'm also looking forward to feeling better soon.
Maybe I will, gosh!
And the final hire we made for the law firm in this last month, for a person who will also be starting in December, is for an intake assistant. So this person will report directly to the intake department manager, and that intake assistant will help cover our evening shift, so 5 p.m. to 12 a.m. on weeknights. So that'll be a really great way to expand our capacity on the intake side, and also help with follow-ups and making sure that we're not falling behind as we ramp up leads, as we ramp up marketing spending. I want to make sure that we are able to capture as many of those leads as possible. Otherwise, we're just throwing money down the drain. And this person is actually a remote hire. This is someone based in the Philippines. So we're going to see how that goes. I'm pretty confident, since this person has worked with U.S. law firms before and is familiar with real estate law generally, and I run a real estate law practice, so that is helpful since they can kind of speak the language with people who are calling about real estate issues. Not that they're advising them by any means, but it does help when you're familiar with the terminology. So also looking forward to that. We have a good feeling about this hire as well. We went through a number of candidates and looking for this assistant and settled on this one. So we'll see what happens. It won't be the last hire on the intake side by any means. We plan on expanding that team to at least a handful of people by the end of the year if all goes well. And of course, we'll have hiccups along the way, but given the amount of savings we have in hiring remotely, as long as one of these remote hires goes well, we're able to afford a lot more people beyond that, because for the same price as one person here in the States, you can potentially get 2, 3, or even 4 people abroad who are just as good or close to as good as someone here in the States. So it's really hard to argue against that, as long as you're able to facilitate that relationship effectively, of course, and that's probably the hardest part, making sure that people stay motivated even when they're far way away. You're not meeting them in person, obviously, because they're in a completely different country, so it'd be very hard to do that anyways. So that's probably the hardest part. And I know at least some of my competition is using that same sort of system where they're saving a lot of money by hiring abroad. They're getting great candidates out there who are also living decent lifestyles for the money that's being paid, because that salary goes a lot further in a different country compared to the US. It's a very interesting sort of thing with the rise of remote work and the internet in general. It's allowed for a lot of these sorts of things to go on. So it's going to be my first major foray into it. I've gotten pretty close to doing it in the past on a larger scale. I've done it on part-time levels before, but this will be my first full-time contractor hire for someone who is in a different country. We'll see how it goes. But as you could probably guess, I spent a lot of my hours over this last month towards non-billable tasks. So getting systems set up and actually trying to find people to put into place so that the long-term growth of the law firm is in a better spot than if I was still trying to do everything myself. It might be a lot easier in the short term, easier and relatively speaking, to just do all the work myself. And I'd make more money today by doing that, but I'd be foregoing a lot of profit down the line because I wouldn't have the systems that would allow for much greater scale. So that's why I'm pushing forward on this now, because I know I want to get to a bigger spot in the future. And in other news, last month, my rental property in Indianapolis finally sold. So there's that. And on that note, let's go ahead and get into this month's numbers. If you're new to this series, I document my net worth every single month on the first of the month and see the change over the previous month to see what's happened on both my assets and liability sides of the balance sheet. So if you're interested in following along, then definitely subscribe. But as a reminder, our net worth last month was about $135,000. As always, let's start with the good stuff, the assets. The most striking change here from the previous month is our cash pile. It is now in a significantly better spot than it was before, and that's because of the property sale I just mentioned a moment ago. We finally sold the Indianapolis rental property, which was 6 or 7 months in the making. I thought it would have sold much earlier than it did. It finally did sell, so finally that is behind us. So now we're down to 3 properties if you count my primary residence here in Houston, and then we have 2 rental properties that were former primary residencies, and those are both in Chicago. But back to this cash pile, we're looking at over $100,000 in cash for the moment. A lot of this is going to be steered towards debt, which we'll get to in a moment, but I already put a little bit towards extra debt pay down, but a lot of it was used to replenish some reserve accounts. I have some fairly major rehab work going on in one of the rental properties, so I threw some money towards that. And I also put quite a bit of cash into my law firm cash as well, so that I have some more room to spend on ads, to hire people, because there's probably going to be a month or 2 here where I'm going to be losing a good bit of money, and I want to make sure I can at least float all of my expenses without having to worry at all. Not that we aren't having money come in every month anyways, but it's probably going to be a couple fairly rough months from a profit perspective, just while we get everything set up, although it should be pretty easy in relative terms to ramp that back up once we get our hires in place and things are going well. Of course, that isn't a given, so I got to be careful either way. I also funneled a good bit of cash into the steam cleaning business to pay down some expenses and to also give us a little bit more breathing room there, because things still aren't going well there, and that's why I'm trying to find a manager to take it over, because I'm really just not paying very much attention at all to this, because I'm putting almost all of my efforts into the law firm side of things. And I did adjust the values of those businesses here too, so I ticked the steam cleaning business value down again about $10,000 or $20,000, while ticking up the Duffley Law equity up to about $60,000. I probably won't raise it much more beyond this until we have some more significant monthly increases in revenue, but I'm basically equating this to about half times annual revenue for an approximate value of the law firm. Granted, I'm not looking to sell it anytime soon. I believe I mentioned in the previous video that I thought I was going to be getting this business loan back in November, but I did not, so now we're looking at a December payoff, but we'll see what happens there. The balance continues to accrue, so that's what's going on there. I would like to get that back before the year end, but we'll see what happens. Otherwise, I did have another fairly significant change here on my balance sheet in that I rolled my traditional IRA that was formerly a traditional 401k with my previous employer. I rolled that into an IRA, and then I rolled that, or converted that, into a Roth IRA. So I combined effectively my 2 IRAs with Vanguard. So now everything is in a Roth IRA, which means I do have something like $30,000 to $35,000 in taxable income. And because I'm rolling a traditional into a Roth, unless I misunderstood something because the tax code is needlessly complex, well, that would mean that I now have a taxable event and that all of the balance that was converted is now taxable income for the year. But because I have so many business losses, it's going to offset all of that anyways, pretty much. So it really should be a decent move to move it into a Roth IRA. So now everything that grows beyond this will be tax-free because it's in a Roth account now. So that should be a nice advantage long-term, even if it means that my eventual tax refund this year might be a bit less. And plus, it's one less account to worry about. But in total, that leaves me with about $1.25 million in assets. And now on to liabilities. I didn't make any huge swings at the debt this month, but I am planning to make a very significant payment towards the promissory note up here, and I will continue to keep making at least the minimum payments for everything else. And I'm going to try to eliminate the credit cards as well, because I have a 0% interest promotional balance there that's actually ending next month, so I want to get that paid back down. At the very worst, I'd recycle it into another credit card that offers 0% interest for 12 or more months or whatever it is. So there's a lot of those offers that I have because I have so many credit cards, so it is kind of nice to have that extra layer of liquidity if I need it, though you do have to pay fees in many cases to actually do that up front, but then you don't pay interest as things go along. So it's a nice tool in the tool belt. I don't want to rely too heavily on it, but that is something I would like to pay down very soon. And speaking of debt pay down, here's our pay down from the last month. You'll note the largest decrease was in the credit card balance that I just mentioned. I threw a couple grand towards that in addition to the minimum payment. Otherwise, pretty much all these were minimum payments. I think the student loans was an accidental double payment from last month, so it was actually a pretty significant decrease in principal, more than last month, but last month was actually an increase. There's something wrong with how they actually did the automatic payments, so I believe that's fixed now, but we had a major decrease there, I guess, bigger than I thought it would have been. But we have managed to pay off 68 grand in debt over the last year, so that is nice to see. I would like to get this close to $200,000, like my goal I set last year to try and pay off $200,000 over the year. I plan on making a very large payment next month, maybe even larger if I do get that business loan balance back that I mentioned. So that should get me pretty close to, we'll call it 150,000. We'll see if I can actually get close to 200,000. I do want to be careful not to spend all of my cash on debt because I have so many things that I want to work on the law firm side, and if I can just use that money to make an additional hire or get things going a little bit more quickly, or to do some sort of marketing effort that leads to more money maybe a few months down the line, then I'd rather do that now rather than pay off some debt that's fixed at 7% interest. Some of those are quite a bit higher than 7%, so I would want to pay those down quickly, much more quickly than the others, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. So I don't want to get too reckless on the debt pay down and leave myself with very little cash. But in total, that leaves us with a little bit under $1.13 million in liabilities, which means our net worth has decreased down to $126,500, which is a decrease of a little over $8,200. Our debt ratio has climbed to 89.91%, and our passive income remains at about $600 per month. So not a great month numbers wise, but I'm looking forward to what's ahead. At least for the next couple months, a lot of my focus is going to be on making sure that the hires for the law firm are going well, and that I'm making sure that people are staying busy, that they're being productive, and that I'm not dropping the ball on anything in actually managing everything while I still try and outsource some of my responsibilities, because I'm technically the leader of everything. So that means that everything falls on me, which is both a blessing and a curse. It's great because I can just jump in and do things, but it's bad because I have very limited time in the day. Everyone has limited time. So I want to be able to try and bring in people who have skill sets suited towards some of the roles that I'm currently managing that I don't necessarily want to manage long term. And I'd rather have someone who's more capable doing those. And in some cases, even if they're not quite as capable, because it's better to have someone in there who can do a pretty good job, and then I can focus on doing a better job on other things that I'm better at. And that's how you end up growing the business a lot more quickly than if I was trying to do everything myself, like I was kind of saying earlier on in the video. But there is such a thing as over hiring, and I want to avoid that. So I want to make sure I get these first few hires done well. We learn what we can in trying to smooth out the process of bringing people on, see where our gaps are, see what our actual pressing need is going into the next couple of months, and seeing where the bottlenecks are. Right now, it has been intake. There's still some things to smooth out there, but we've made some nice progress, and I think it's going to be really good when we bring in an intake assistant. And then the legal side of things will be much more on me because that is my department. I am the only attorney on staff at the moment, so I would be very much the supervisor of the entire legal department for now. So I'd want to make sure that that hire is done well and that I learn as much as I can before we go and hire another associate, maybe in the next month or two if things go well. And also when we go and hire a paralegal or a secretary and see where the needs are for the legal team. But I'm trying to give a good amount of autonomy to my intake department manager to run that side of things. We're talking all the time, obviously, about what to implement and different things to try, but she's done this before on the intake side of things, so I want to give her a good amount of autonomy in doing that. Whatever the case, there is plenty of stuff to work on. With all that said, if you want to follow along, I'll be posting a lot about my law firm journey and trying to run a law firm and grow it and get it to a nice spot long term and all the things I'll be learning along the way. But I'll also be posting updates to this series periodically, just as I have been for a few years now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next year.